Good afternoon and welcome back to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me at MarketSite is Bill Dague. He's the head of alternative data over at Nasdaq, and we're excited to welcome you to the Nasdaq Analytics Hub. Before we get into that, Bill, let's talk about what is alternative data and why is it different than traditional data?
Sure, yeah, so alternative data is really any type of content that typically isn't thought of in sort of financial analysis. So it's really sort of a broad catch-all term for all sorts of different types of data. And it's sort of different from traditional data where typically, data that it's traditional is used to analyze how a company is doing. So it's data about the financials, it's data about the stock price, and alt data relates to sort of things that are important about the company but maybe not captured there. So imagine you wanted to analyze a retail chain. You could use the typical financial numbers. You look at sales and how much are they selling in certain stores, or you could use alternative data, things like satellite images, foot traffic, or credit card receipts to get a better understanding of what those sales numbers might be even before the quarter end.
What type of challenges do you see with firms as they try to navigate and manage alt data?
Yeah, so there's a lot. So really pretty much every part of the process there's a challenge. So first of all, just sourcing it. How do you find interesting content? There are hundreds, even thousands of providers out there. How do you wade through that and find content that's going to meet your use case? Then once you find something that's interesting, how do you make sure that it's valuable? How do you bring it in, normalize that and clean it up, and then get it ready to use? And then lastly, it's just achieving ROI. So alt data tends to be very expensive, and that whole process of bringing it in and analyzing it can be very expensive as well. So getting enough value out of that data to make it worth it is also a challenge, and that's where the Analytics Hub comes in.
So tell us about the Nasdaq Analytics
Sure.
Hubs and who's some of our partners who would want to use the hub?
Sure. So the Analytics Hub is Nasdaq's offering for alternative data, and it's really geared toward the buy side. So we're really looking at how can investors, even those who take a sort of a longer term view, get more insight and leverage the content in our platform. So we work with third-party vendors who come and host content on our platform, and then we take a look and say, how can we help validate, vet this data, make sure that it's useful and interesting, and then present that to our customers.
So how does this add value to the data that we host? Does it make it more manageable for the end user?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do the work of, again, validating and vetting that. We'll perform back tests and provide some research around what the data is. We'll apply global asset identifiers, and then we'll apply our machine intelligence and analytical capabilities to make sure that, find the right use case and help structure that data so that it's usable.
All right, and finally, are we at the exploration phase of everything that can be done with data?
Yeah, I would say we're pretty early on. So there's been quite a mushrooming of different content providers out there. We've seen it go from tens to hundreds and maybe thousands now in a short amount of time. But when you look at the integration into the investment workflow and the decision-making process, especially on the buy side, more fundamental focused firms, we have a long way to go.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us at
Thanks for having
MarketSite.
me.
And thank you for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.